Well, welcome back to the third part of looking at the secular humanism and the challenges that it brings from a biblical worldview. We've been tracing some of the history of religious thought and intellectual pursuits from the founding of Christianity forward. And last time we were talking about the humanism and how it is actually a product of Christian thinking, and the fact that it elevates humanity in the sense of saying humanity is important. And of course, that is a biblical worldview that God created humanity in his image. And so this was being taken seriously, but it was within a Christian framework at this point. And that's kind of where we left off with Petrarch and the father of the Renaissance and of humanism. And that he approached humanism from the framework of a Christian perspective. But that's going to change as we move into Renaissance and Enlightenment times, and then further on, and that's the direction we're heading with this next video. I've made the videos shorter this time around for this series on secular humanism. So hopefully I will keep them as short as I'm hoping. So let me share the screen with you as we get started. All right. So as we move into from the Scholastic period and into the Renaissance, you have Renaissance humanism, which is defined similarly to this. It means an intellectual movement of the 15th century when there was a new interest in the classical world and studies which focus less on religion and more on what it is to be human. And so, like Petrarch, who found the ancient manuscripts, began translating them in Italian. Other Renaissance thinkers, and these would be your highly intellectual people, most of who, a good number of them would have been Christian in some regard, but some of them moving away from Christian thinking. But they would be taking the classical works like Aristotle and Plato and many others, and just looking back at those and approaching it more from a humanist perspective. And then you would have the Enlightenment humanism as you move from the Renaissance period into the Enlightenment period. And it's characterized by such keywords as autonomy, reason, progress. So Enlightenment humanism is distinguished from Renaissance humanism because of its more secular nature. In other words, it's even moving further away from seeing the religious framework or the framework of Christianity as being a part of their thinking when they're thinking about humanity, because they're thinking, well, the autonomous individual and reason and progress, which will be added to science, will be, what really should motivate humans and is the answer that humanity can do all these things on its own and God's not going to be necessary. So it's moving in that direction as we go forward. So if you define humanism, there's a lot of definitions, and we're just going to look at a few and talk about them. And then we'll get right down to talking about a particular type of humanism. One definition is a cultural and intellectual movement of the Renaissance and Enlightenment that emphasized secular concerns as a result of the rediscovery and study of literature, art, and civilization of ancient Greece and Rome. And that is a good one for Renaissance, mainly for Renaissance humanism. The next one, a system of thought that rejects religious beliefs and centers on humans and their values, capacities, and worth. Now, when you get in that, this is more of an Enlightenment view and could move you on into the secular humanist view, where they're going to just remove religious and belief factors out altogether. Third one there, a worldview that emphasizes a secular way of life. So notice now they specified this is secular, meaning no religious aspect to it, and is centered on human flourishing, prioritizing rationalism while considering human beings as the starting point for serious moral and philosophical inquiry. So the center now becomes humans and emphasizing a secular way of life, meaning we've taken out a religious aspect to it or a spiritual dimension to how we understand the world. So that worldview, this definition is, for practical purposes, a secular humanist definition. Well, oops. There is a Christian humanism, and you get Webster's dictionary, a philosophy advocating the self-fulfillment of man within the framework of Christian principles. And that's a fairly simple, straightforward definition. And really, for those of us who espouse a biblical worldview and as Christians, because we believe God did create humanity in his image, and humanity is ultimate worth to God, and all people are of equal value in God's sight. Christianity, by its very nature, is humanistic. And the fact that humanism arose out of Christian thinking should tell us something right there. But even now, as you have secular humanism, which takes out the spiritual dimension of things, Christians still operate with a humanist perspective of how we treat humanity, and we want the fulfillment of humanity, but not to the expense of what God directs and what God wants, because our worldview would say, well, God gave us that worth, but he's given us directions how to make that worth, make the world better. And simply saying we can make the world better based on reason and science and technology hasn't worked out well so far, but we're saying that's too limited. You have to have the spiritual dimension, because what you're doing is you're throwing out the whole person, which is made up of both a spiritual and physical dimension. And so, but Christian humanists, quite possible, I would consider myself a Christian humanist in that regard. But we just need to understand the historical backdrop and realize that humanism came out of Christian principles. Although I'm sure a lot of secular humanists would say that's not true or would deny it. Secular humanism, it can be called modern humanism, naturalistic humanism, scientific humanism, ethical humanism, and democratic humanism, just to name the main ones. We'll use secular humanism here. Corliss Lamont, one of the top guys to write about it, taught it in school, in the university. He says it's a naturalistic philosophy that rejects all supernaturalism and relies primarily on reason and science. And he says democracy and human compassion. At various points, they might throw in socialism as the more important political direction, but in either case, he is has been one of the major spokesmen in the 20th century, and his writings are still referred to today. And he calls it a naturalistic philosophy. There are writings among secular humanists that would call it a religious humanism. And there is big debate among secular humanists as whether they should call it a religious humanism or not. And they don't totally agree on that. Some see, the advantage to having that being called a religious type of religion. Others not so much. Lamont was the one that would say, no, it's naturalistic. So just realize that they have disagreements, where the strange thing is for evangelical leaders, some of them really subscribe to the idea that this is a secular humanism as a religion. Now, for our course, we've defined what religion is, and it does not fit that definition we have for religion. So, depending on your definition, as we've said in the past, of religion, you can do it. And there is a Supreme Court case that will indicate that they accept secular humanism as a religion. Also, in the midst of secular humanism and a biblical worldview in our society in the United States, what we really have is religious pluralism. This is when you have a lot of different religions and in which people participate. The U.S. has not, as the secularization thesis had put forward in the 1970s, that by now we should be mainly secular humanists in the U.S. hasn't turned out to be correct. So we do have a very pluralistic society, of which secular humanism is a major component in the world around us. When Christianity came in the world, as we saw earlier, it came into a world that was extremely pluralistic, even more pluralistic than the United States. And and yet it flourished and came to be the religion that changed so much of the world as we know it today, particularly in the West. So beyond the various religions is the practice of secular humanism. And one of the reasons we cover it in the world religions class as a worldview is because it is becoming one of the most prevalent belief systems and worldviews that we come in contact with in the U.S. If you consider the number of Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus or even Jews, they make up a very small percentage of the American population, where secular humanism makes up a percentage larger than any one of those. And so it becomes important for us to discuss secular humanism. So when we look at kind of go back through the history we've been looking at, and we're moving up to what I would call the crossroads here. There is a book at the crossroads that is a good book on the biblical worldview in the midst of a secular situation. I recommend that be that is a book, but it uses the idea of a crossroads. When you look back at history, from foundation of the world, mankind's been notoriously religious. It's been an open worldview. 99.999% probably throughout history would have an open worldview in which the world is both physical and spiritual. And now, of course, take away in the Eastern world religions, they have a different type of worldview in the sense that the world's illusion, and so they don't believe in both the physical and the spiritual. The physical is illusion, and so it's all a mental construct, and so they have a form of monism. But we're looking mainly from the Western lenses. And so you have the Jewish and Christian worldview, which believed in one God, and but you had other worldviews and pluralism of the time. You can't read through the Bible without seeing all the other types of religion out there, polytheistic religions that did human sacrifices to all kinds of strange things. So all through history, God's people have been in the midst of pluralistic situation. And this is the case. And as we moved on in from to more modern times, hit the Renaissance in the 14th century, and then Enlightenment, 17th, 18th centuries, that time period. It's in this time period at the end is when the founding of the U.S., which we're going to talk about some because it was highly influenced by the Enlightenment and by Christianity. And then, of course, you got the Industrial Revolution occurring in this time period and over on into the 19th century. And then last the 19th to 20th century. Of course, now we're in the 21st century. But this is the modern world's 19th, 20th century, this modern world. I think 21st, we're still in modern world, but maybe there's a new name for it, the digital age or the age of media, whatever it may be. But it's at this stage that all the modernization and the thinking about humanism and science and technology are all being mixed together with media, and you begin to see this secularization becoming more prevalent than ever before. That's why it's a crossroads here. And so you begin to really, at this point, it begins on in the Enlightenment period, but really starts into the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries. That's when you'll see more and more this division between a Christian foundation worldview or an open worldview versus a secular or a closed worldview. And so this gap has been growing, particularly in Western Europe. It's grown faster than the U.S., but it is growing in the U.S., just not near as fast as scholars had thought back in 70s when I was cutting my teeth on my first round at university. And so we're going to be talking about how this gap increases over time, how, even in the founding of the nation, the gap between Christian beliefs and a secular government were intertwined, and which a lot of people today would say, well, that's not the way it was supposed to be, but actually it was the way it was supposed to be, and we'll be looking at that. But this gap is getting bigger, and so one of the reasons for putting the study in here is to say this is one of the major areas you're going to be confronting when you're talking about different worldviews. And our last presentation will be dealing with the engagement of secular humanism in the world and what we, from a biblical worldview, can do to engage this that we'll be running into more and more. And so this is to give you an overview of that. Now, to zoom in here on this crossroads is to indicate that you have the Christian perspective, which until recently in the West was dominant. The vast majority of people were Christian perspective. Now, the vast majority of the world is still religious. About 95% of the world is religious, has an open worldview. They believe there's a physical and spiritual dimension to some degree. But the Christian perspective in Western world, Western Europe and the US, are being squeezed more, and secular humanism is making inroads. And we need to be aware that the pressure points come from the knowledge sector you see here, science and reason, which come that are, part of philosophical thinking and, science research and so forth, wealth accumulation and popular media. And we'll talk more about those as we get there. But it's at this crossroad that we are intersecting with this idea of secular humanism more. And out of this mix, some people choose the Christian worldview, others the secular worldview. I myself, when I was in university in California, I was on this route, really was. And I didn't have much use for religion. But as I studied, some things just didn't seem to fit. And in the end, I would end up switching over here and pursuing a different route. I completed my degree that I had started while I was on this route, but then I had another degree that helped me to understand my own thinking, and at the same time helped me bridge this gap, which at that time was a lot smaller than it is now. So, but we're going to be talking about how this gap continued to go and how it was affected by certain things in the U.S., but how it was at the founding of the nation, and then how it changed after the first 150 years of the founding of the nation. And so that would actually bring us over to talk about the ruling that would change everything. And because the Supreme Court would have a ruling in the mid 20th century, specifically in a case in 1947, Everson versus the Board of Education. The U.S. Supreme Court, since the mid 20th century, has interpreted the First Amendment as if it requires a wall of separation. You've heard it said probably many times, separation between church and state. Meaning by that, it not only prohibits the government from adopting a particular denomination, which the Establishment Clause does specifically say you can't do that, and that's what the intent of the Founding Fathers were. In other words, not to have an official religion, state religion that people had to go to, because that was so abused in Europe. The Founding Fathers definitely didn't want that. But this ruling of having this wall of separation is actually in violation of the Free Expression Clause. Not only they can't establish it, but they can't stop the free expression of your religious motivations and conscience. And it doesn't limit where that could be. It doesn't say, you have to keep it in a church building or privately. And it doesn't say you can have free expression, but not in the public sphere. Well, but it has regularly ruled to limit religious expression in the public sphere, from prayer in the schools to passive displays of the Ten Commandments, which had been allowed the first 150 years of the nation. And so we need to realize that that has been going on since that one at that time. So as we move forward, we take a look here at the establishment, the First Amendment, and we see that in the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So just like freedom of speech or press, you should have the free exercise of exercising your religious rights. And that would include religious speech and practice. And just like it would be freedom of speech and practice of that speech, whatever it might be, and the press, and so, and then it goes on to talk about the right of people peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redressing grievances. So you have the Establishment Clause cannot establish a state religion, and then the Free Exercise Clause, which the United States must allow the free exercise of religion. And it didn't limit it to the private sphere, to church buildings or your own personal meditations, just like it didn't require freedom of speech to be limited to those private spheres. But that will be changed as we go forward, and you do have the landmark case that takes place in 1947, Everson versus the Board of Education. This is where the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment is talked about, but they also are going to use the term that comes to be known as the separation of church and state. This was a lawsuit that taxpayers in New Jersey brought against the state to stop travel reimbursement to parents sending their kids to religious schools by the state of New Jersey. So some taxpayers brought the case, said, we don't like the fact that these people are using taxpayer dollars to send their kids to religious schools, which of course these same taxpayers are paying taxes into the state, which pays for public schools. But they claimed it violated both the state and the U.S. Constitution supporting one religion. Now, of course, not all these people were necessarily going to send their kids to the same religious school, but in any case, this is the case that brought it forward, and this case would overthrow 150 years of precedents. Everson versus Board of Education, and then for the next 75 years up until this year in 2022, this would set the precedents for further court cases, and we'll look at some of those. But it began a judicial process of secularizing the U.S. government away from what its original intention between the protection of religious freedom was intended for, as the founding fathers developed this, what they called the experiment. Nobody had put a system of government in place like the U.S. system ever in history, and they weren't sure how well it would work. But they were sure about a number of things, and that was you had to have the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, freedom of press, unlike the systems in Europe that they came out of. But they also said to make that happen, you also had to have a moral foundation, which for them was Christian belief system. And we'll see some of that as we go forward. So in this one, the interpretation put forward by the board that would overturn this 150 years of legal interpretation that allowed for public expression of religion, even in government-supported entities, such as they held church services in the Capitol building. Several congregations would meet. One would come in and meet in the morning on Sunday, and one would leave. The next one come in. I think there was at least 3 or 4, and then one would meet. I think it was Adams who said that one was meeting in the Treasury Department at one point. But the interpretation went contrary to the government interpretation and practice to that time period. But this ruling now would change that. Now the ruling put forward that the government could not give any encouragement or financial aid to any religion. The founding fathers' writings all disagree with this. And even the ones that were the least religious, that are always pointed out, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, you can see in their writings where they disagree with this. But we will be exploring that more as we go forward. And so we'll cut this off at this point, because as we go forward, we're going to be looking at the legal precedences before 1947, and then what happens after 1947, and some of the court cases that continue this idea. But then we'll also see in this year we see a couple of reversals, which is very interesting. So we'll pick up on that next time. And so I'll bid you a good day on this one, and we'll start anew in the next one.